So as you guys know from my previous videos on Tesla, and I've really only made like a couple videos on Tesla, you know that I am very bullish on Tesla for the long term, but I've just never been brave enough to pull the trigger on the stock. And the reason why is because I wanted to see a little bit more consistency and I wanted to see a little bit more of an attractive valuation. And while I still think that Tesla has a lot of work to do to win over my total confidence in the company, I am now starting to feel a little bit more confident in their long-term potential, and I no longer feel like their valuation is like ridiculously expensive or out of my reach when you consider all of the growth and future potential that you're getting in return for investing in a stock like Tesla. Now, in the last video that I made about Tesla, where I analyzed the whole company and the entire stock and everything that goes along with it. By the way, if you want to check out that video, I'll have it linked in the description. It's a more like in detail video. But I mentioned in that video that if Tesla was to drop a little bit or pull back a little bit to the current levels that they're trading at right now, I would probably consider opening up a small position in the stock. So today we're going to talk about the reasons why I finally decided to pull the trigger on Tesla stock and opened up a small position. And so we're going to talk about their current stock conditions. We're going to talk about their recent performance of the company, and we're going to talk about the enormous amount of future potential that I still think Tesla has for the long term. So we're going to talk about all of that and a lot more in today's video. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hit the like button if you enjoy this, and let's get started. What's up everybody, my name is Ala and welcome to my world of stocks. So right off the bat, I purchased about 10% of the overall position that I want to eventually have in Tesla. So I basically picked up 10% of that position that I want to eventually have for the future, for the long term. And so you might be asking, well, why did you only pick up 10%? Well, you're probably asking that question if you're new to the channel, but if you're a kind of an old school subscriber of the channel, then you know that I usually enter positions very slowly, especially with a more speculative stock like Tesla, which in my opinion is still a spec stock. So I usually enter the position very slowly with a very small amount in hopes that the stock actually continues to drop, and so I can add to it over time. You guys know that I'm more of a long-term investor that looks out very, very distant into the future, like 5 to 10 years, but usually actually a lot more. Unless something changes with the company, then I readjust. But I also use a little bit of a modified dollar cost averaging strategy. And so if the stock continues to drop, that actually really benefits me because I'm implementing a little bit of a dollar cost averaging strategy, so I can actually pick up more shares. And if the stock really climbs by a lot, then sometimes I trim my position a little bit, or I just kind of sit back and wait a little bit for some dips and pullbacks. But anyway, I just want to start the video by letting you know that I did pick up 10%, and I am planning to add to that in the coming, couple years or so, or even months, if it actually pulls back and continues to drop. And by the way, I actually don't think that it's that crazy to imagine Tesla actually dropping more, just because Tesla is a very volatile stock, and the other reason is that we do have some macroeconomic concerns heading into the next couple years. A lot of talks about a possible recession as well, things like that. So though there are definitely scenarios where I think I could potentially pick up Tesla stock even cheaper, but I'd like to just jump in now in case the stock does kind of take off. I'd like to just have a small position out and just kind of add to it over time. And the reason I'm starting to buy here is because we've recently seen pretty good support around these levels. And while they are still up by 15% in the past 5 years, they've seen a pretty good pullback in more recent history and are down 20% year to date, and are also down over 30% from their 52-week high. So that's a pretty good dip there. I know a lot of people hate Tesla stock and think that the company will go bankrupt eventually, but my personal opinion is that we will see them pass that 52-week high again. And even if we have to wait for the next recession to come and go, I still think that Tesla will reach those levels at some point and greatly surpass them in the maybe not too distant future, but also in the distant future as well, if we have to wait for that. So why do I feel this way? Well, for starters, I think that the automobile industry will eventually head towards a future of much more electric vehicles that have some type of autonomous functionality. And I think we can all agree that Tesla is really ahead of the pack, but talk is cheap, so let's run through a couple graphs that I think support my opinion. Now, this first chart is from Statista, and it shows that the EV market was worth less than $120 billion in 2017, but is expected to grow to over $567 billion by 2025. And the compound annual growth rate from last year to 2025 is estimated to be over 22%, which is pretty good. And Tesla is well positioned to take advantage of this growth as they are already building their third gigafactory, which is in China, and there are even rumors that Tesla will likely be building a fourth gigafactory sometime in Europe. Speaking of which, Tesla has already started shipping the Model 3 there, and when looking at those two specific markets, according to evvolumes.com, China alone is selling more EVs than both the US and all of Europe combined. And they're also growing at one of the highest rates, not to mention that Bloomberg predicts that China's dominance will continue at least through 2030, but will likely continue even further than that. Granted, most of the EVs sold in China are really cheap vehicles without autonomous functionality, but it still shows that there is growth to be had for Tesla, not to mention that their newest expansions into the European markets will likely be a huge success, as some of the biggest EV markets in the world are actually European countries, many of which also have some of the highest gas prices in the world. By the way, the US really pales in comparison when looking at those gas prices, yet Tesla is still dominating the United States market. Here's a few charts from cleantechnica.com that I featured in my previous video, and they show just how dominant Tesla is in their home country. If we look at the top 20 best-selling cars in the fourth quarter of 2018, not including SUVs or trucks, the Tesla Model 3 was ranked number 5, only behind Toyota and Honda, which are like, two of the biggest, most popular brands out there. And then in December, it climbed even higher, beating out the Toyota Corolla for the number 4 spot. Keep in mind that the Toyota Corolla is one of the best-selling cars in the whole world. And if we shrink the sample size to what the Model 3 really is, which is more of a mid-sized luxury car, we can see that US sales in 2018 were completely lopsided in favor of the Model 3, and it gets even worse in December once production was actually ramped up. Even Tesla's older models like the S and the X are still selling very well despite needing a bit of a refresh, with the Model S beating out any large luxury cars, while the Model X comes in at the number 3 spot of large luxury SUVs. But again, those are just luxury vehicles. If we look at US electric car sales for the fourth quarter of 2018, Tesla takes up the top 3 spots, beating out any possible competitor, with the Model 3 being like in a whole nother universe on its own by comparison. And all of this dominance has led to some very nice growth for the company, as they were able to grow revenues last year by over 82%, and while they were still not profitable for the year, they did at least cut their losses by almost half, and they were also profitable in the last 2 quarters by significant amounts. Granted, there is a chance that they report a small loss in Q1 of 2019, but to my knowledge, management still expects to be profitable in the 3 quarters after, and will likely be profitable for the year, that being 2019. Still, I think the biggest concern that I have about Tesla right now, which is kind of a weird concern, but it has to do with the Model Y. Now, they just recently announced the Model Y. It's like a smaller SUV. It's a crossover SUV. And it's supposed to be a lot cheaper than like the Model X. By the way, the Model X can sometimes run for like north of $100,000. So the Model X can be very expensive. And I think that a lot of people really like SUVs. So I could definitely see a lot of people wanting to pick up the Model Y. The issue is that first of all, some people feel that the Model Y is a little lackluster. I don't really care about that because I think it's insanely cheap. Like, you can essentially get the cheapest version of the Model Y when it launches in spring of 2021 for just $39,000. That is very, very cheap. Like, compared to the Model 3 at $35,000, that's just $4,000 more. You can pick up an actual SUV. Some people feel it's a little lackluster because it's based off of the Model 3 platform and it shares many of the same components, like 70% of the components or something like that. So many people felt that it was just a little lackluster and they weren't too excited about the announcement. I think when they actually announced it, the stock kind of dipped a little bit too. So there's kind of that, but I don't really see that. That's a short-term drama. I don't care about that. But in the long term, I think the Model Y will be very successful. On one hand, I think it's great that it's going to cost eventually $39,000. I think I can see so many people wanting to pick that up. On the other hand, it's not launching until possibly like 2 years from now. So I can't help but wonder if it may cannibalize some of the sales of the Model 3, because if I personally had the choice between a $35,000 Model 3 or a $39,000 Model Y, which would be like an SUV, I would definitely try my hardest to shell out just an extra $4,000 and get that SUV, because I think for the most part, people would prefer an SUV over like a sedan or something like that. But I could be wrong. And on the flip side of that, I think there's some good potential there for some upside, because maybe we go the next couple years with the Model 3 still selling very well, and then we eventually get that $39,000 Model Y, and maybe even that pickup truck that Tesla is supposed to be working on. Then you could have really good sales now and even better sales in the future. So there is potential, there's a couple ways that you could look at this, but again, I'm just a little worried about it cannibalizing some of the Model 3 sales, because if I was in that position where I was about to pick up a Model 3, I think at this point, I would rather just wait for that Model Y and pick that one up, a couple years from now. But I don't speak for everyone, and I know a lot of people are like very impatient, so they might just pick up a Model 3 anyway. And maybe some, I'm sure there's a lot of people that just want a sedan anyway, a smaller sedan. So, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. But I just wanted to mention that's a little concern that I have. In any case, even at these prices, I wouldn't necessarily call Tesla stock cheap, as they were not profitable last year, and even their forward PE is at almost 30. So that is a little bit of a premium valuation. Now, their PEG of 1.5 doesn't look too bad thanks to that future growth, but their PS of 2.2 and their PB of 9.6 are still pretty high, especially that PB ratio. However, I'd argue that for the growth you're getting and for, the high value of a Tesla and the high value market that Tesla operates in, I think these prices aren't really as expensive as they seem. In any case, I did pick up 10% of the position that I want, and I don't have any regrets about it. I'm feeling pretty good about it. If it drops, I will be adding to it. Even if I get negative comments from people telling me that I'm catching a falling knife or whatever kind of drama they want to spew out, that doesn't really matter to me. I'd love to pick up the stock at even cheaper prices. That would be really good. And if it takes off and I happen to miss the boat in any kind of scenario like that, that's never anything that I'm ever worried about or I regret, because there's always opportunities in the stock market. So I always prefer having a more cautious approach and just making smart decisions rather than throwing my money around hoping to catch the next huge stock and make a short-term gain. I'm always thinking long-term, many years out. So Tesla just kind of fits the bill for that. So anyway, that's how I feel. Let me know if you guys have any questions or thoughts. If you're invested in Tesla, if you hate Tesla, if you love Tesla, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave them down below, and I'll try to reply to as many comments as I can. But hit the like button if you enjoyed this. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.